The Saudi-led coalition that has waged a war on Yemen since 2015 has recently intensified its attacks on the country. There have been reports that over 70 Yemeni civilians have died in what appears to have been a surge in air raids by the Saudis and their allies since Sunday. Aid agencies say the civilian casualties included many children and women. The intensification of the attacks on Yemen appears to be in response to the recent firing of a missile by the country's resistance forces at the Saudi capital, Riyadh. But it looks like the Saudis and their allies have closed their eyes to the real costs of their blind revenge.
What we're seeing here is something very similar to Vietnam. And that is, despite the massive firepower of the Saudis, with all the high-tech weapons and the shameful support they've gotten from the British, French, Germans, and the U.S. in terms of flying combat control missions for them and supplying them with targeting, they have not been able to defeat the poorest Arab nation in the world.
The sufferings of the Yemeni people come in face of the failure of international institutions like the United Nations to take the proper action to stop the war. But many other parties are also partners in crime with the Saudis in a war that has left 14,000 killed, many of them women and children. They include the United States and several other Western states that sell weapons to the Saudis. Many believe that the Saudis are pushing ahead a war of attrition in Yemen, but the outcomes are clearly not what they desired. Yemen has truly become a Vietnam in its own right for Saudi Arabia. The costs they are suffering as a result of this are visibly high. This is mainly due to the successful resistance of Yemeni forces.
The Saudis thought that they were going to do a war of attrition. Something that an undiscussed part of the story is that attrition was not so much in military losses, because the Yemenis were able to spread out their forces very much, a whole great deal, so they didn't really offer a lot of big targets for like decapitation strikes. So they did something that had all the fingerprints of the Israelis on it and their attacks on Lebanon. And that is to destroy the infrastructure, the water, the sewer plants, all the control, everything that the public needed, to grind the country down to where the public would suffer so much that that would undermine the support for the regime. But just like happened with North Vietnam, that actually backfired on them because the public's position hardened. And they wanted to fight even harder and to show that they would not give in to the Saudis and the imperial powers behind them.
It may have been a surprise to many to realize that the US has called for a political solution to end the Yemen conflict. It has emphasized that there is no military solution to end the war in Yemen. But analysts say this declaration is part of a wider plan for regional politics with consequences that go beyond Yemen's borders.
And someone has decided, they've pressed a button to say we want to start backing away from this Yemen thing. I don't think, because they've come to Jesus and they don't want to continue their imperialist operations. But they want to concentrate manpower, money, and U.S. coalition forces, unfortunately, to some new unfortunate subject, or to continue trying to torment Syria so they cannot consolidate their own government without being piecemealed or balkanized politically now.
The war that the Saudi-led alliance has declared on Yemen does not appear to have any clear winner, but its costs on human lives have already proved dear. And it appears that in the absence of global institutions like the UN that are responsible for struggling to end such conflicts, the destiny of millions has been left to the mercy of outside powers.